Hi everyone, in this video we are going to continue our JWT implementation, and what we're going to do is we will create a filter which will be executed for every incoming request and will read the token and validate it. Okay, so I have created a package called filter, and in this I'm going to create a filter here and name this as JWT token authorization filter. Okay, and this is going to extend once per request filter. Okay, and we have an unimplemented method here, so let's implement it. It's going to be this do filter internal. So this is going to get executed for every incoming request. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to auto wire our JWT token util class that we created in our previous session. So let's auto wire it. Token util WT token util. Okay, and I will also auto wire user service because I'm going to use this to load the user after we validate the token. So let's auto wire this. Okay, next what we're going to do is here we're going to write the logic to read the token from the request. So first thing is if the incoming request is of method options, we would skip all the validation. We want to let it go, and it's okay to have a method with HTTP method with options. So we're going to do that first. So request.get method dot equals, in our case, and I would say options. Okay, and here what I'll say is response dot set status as HTTP status dot okay dot value. Okay, so next what we're going to do is we'll add an else we have to do all the validation. Okay, the first thing is we need to read the token from the request header, and we can do that by getting request.header, and we'll be reading it from the authorization. So this is the one header where we'll be setting our token value. Okay, when the user successfully logs in, when we generate the token, we set it in the header with the name authorization. So for any request thereafter coming into the application, we will read that header and then validate it. So let's do that. Authorization. So I have this as string the curious request token, and next what I'm going to do here is I create two variables, username, and then I'll have another variable called JWT token. Okay, so this is not the actual token. Basically, the authorization when we create, when we generate and set it into the header, before we set it in the header, we will add a prefix called barrier. Okay, so we would then truncate it to get the actual token from our authorization header. So let's do that. First thing is let's check whether do we have the header or not. So the request token is not equal to null and request token dot starts with variable. So the reason why I'm using this is I'm checking is because I want to make sure that it has the authorization format, the value format is correct. Okay, I'm checking it's not null and it starts with a bearer. Next, we will extract our token. I would say that as request token dot substring, and I would say this as 7. If you look at this, the value is 0 1 2 3 4 5. Okay, and a space. Basically I'll have a space also here. Okay, and then I will have a substring. Perfect. So this will give me the token. Okay, so actually the value will be something like this. Okay, remember I'm just giving you an idea here. It's going to be something like this, and space, then I'll have all my values something like this. Okay, it's going to be some value. So this is going to be all token which is prefixed with bearer here, and I'm just getting the actual token. Next, what I'm going to do is, after I get this, I am going to get the username from my token, and I would say this dot JWT dot get username from token, and that is going to be my token. Perfect. So I get the token, I got my username, and then I also got the token. Next, what I'm going to do is, if there is something wrong with this, okay, then I'm going to say that I'm going to have else block here, and I would say let me have a logger also here. Okay, I'll have private static final logger is equal to log manager. Okay, dot get logger. Okay, got a wrong version of log. It is going to be log4j. Dot get logger, and I'm going to say this as JWT. Okay, it's going to be this dot class. So it's going to be perfect. So this, and then I'm going to use this logger, which I would say here as logger dot, and I'm going to print a warning message. Okay, and it would be JWT token is null or does not begin with bearer string for URL, and I'll give the URL here, request URI. Okay, so next what I'm going to do is, if the username exists, okay, the username is returned, then what I'm going to do is, if username is not equal to null, and now see here what I'm going to do. I'm going to check the security context for the authentication object. In previous session I told that authentication object, once created, will be placed in the security context, right? So I want to check whether the security context already has the authentication object, okay, or not. So that is what I'm going to check here. Context holder dot get context dot get authentication, and if it is null, and user is there in the token, then I'm going to get the user object from the database. Okay, so the aim of this all logic is, to create the authentication object and place it in the context. Okay, I'll repeat. There are two steps that we are doing. One is validating the token. Next is creating the authentication object and placing it in the context. Okay, so we have not reached the point where we validate the token. We are just reading the token first, and then we'll validate it. Okay, so let's do that first. Let's get the user object using the username from the token. So as you see, we have already the service here, so I'm going to use that dot load user by username, and I'm going to use the username here, and this is going to return me the user details. Okay, now I got the user details object. Here what I'm going to do next is I am going to now validate the token. Now first thing is I'm going to do is user details is not equal to null. That means the user exists in the database, and this dot JWT token dot validate token. I'll pass the token and then the principal. That the principal is nothing but our username here, and that I'll be passing from the details object. Okay, so what it does, it's giving me an error. It says validate token takes the user principal. Okay, it's giving, let's look at it. Okay, it looks like here we have a method that is validate token that accepts user principal, not the string over here. So what we can do is, we can tweak our util method here to just accept the string, that is the username, but I would like to overload this. That would be good enough. String, and I don't need this. Okay, so this looks good to me. So I have two methods, that is overloaded method, with one accepts the principal and the other accepts the string. Okay, so this is going to be our username. So let's go back here, and you can see the error is gone. So what we are doing is we are passing the token and the username that is retrieved from the database, and here the token that we are passing, again in the validate method, what it's going to do, it's going to get the username from the token, and then it's going to compare, and also it's going to check if the token is expired or not, and depending on that it's going to return us true or false. So that looks good. So next what we are going to do is we are going to get the authorities from the token. Okay, here that means it's a valid token. Then what happens? Then what we do is we get the authorities. Then I would say, and here I'm going to use the get authorities. Perfect. Next, then I'll create the authentication object. This dot JWT, and I'm going to say the get authentication, where I'll pass the username, okay, and then the authorities, and then the request. Okay, this looks good. I got the authentication object now, and then finally what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it in the security context. Security context holder dot get context dot set authentication. Perfect. So that is done. So now the authentication is set in the context. What happens if the token is invalid? So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear the context, because you see here that means the username is not null and the context authentication is null. Only then this get executed. That means there exists an authentication object in the security context. In that case, we are going to clear it, and we do that by security context holder dot clear context. Perfect. So next what we are going to do is here, once all this get executed, here is where I'm going to do filter chain dot do filter request response. So I'm making sure that my request then moves on to the next filter. So what we did, okay, in this filter, we first checked whether the request is of option. If yes, then we just put the status as okay, that is 200, and then move on to the next filter in the chain. Else what we do is we read the token, that is the authorization, that is the name of the header in which we'll be setting our token. Then what we did is we read the username from the token and the JWT token itself from the header. And then what we did is next we check the validity of the token here by reading the user from the database and using the token itself. Now if the token is valid, then we read the authorities from the token and then created the authentication object. Okay, and then finally we set that authentication object in the security context holder, that is basically in the security context. And finally what we do is we continue with the filter chain. So the main purpose of this filter is to read the token, validate it, and set the authentication object. Okay, so I think we are good with the filter, and one thing that I missed to add is the component. Okay, so this will be created. So how do we use this? Okay, here still it's giving an error. Why is it giving an error? It says, let me save all the files. Okay, so how do we configure this filter? We know that when the request comes in, it has to go through the filter chain, right? All the filter chain. So if you look at the security documentation, you can see that we have the security filters and we have all this filter chain, right? So your request is going to go through all these filters. So if you see here, there is something called username password authentication filter. So what we're going to do is we want this filter to be executed, okay, the one that we created, this filter to be executed before this username password authentication filter, just here before this. Okay, to do that we need to go to our security config file and set it over there. So how do we do that? Let's see. So let's go to our app configuration here, and in this what we are going to do is first AutoWire. Okay, so I'm going to be private and I would say this as JWT token authorization filter, and I would say this is JWT token filter. Okay, and I'll AutoWire this, and this I'm going to use it over here because this is related to HTTP, right? So we are going to add it over here. Here I'm going to do this dot and add filter. It should be not here, sorry, not here, it should be on HTTP. Where's HTTP? Here. Okay, dot add, okay, permit all, and I would say add dot add filter. Yes, then here I'm going to say add filter, but I would say add before filter, add filter before. Okay, and I would say this as this dot, and before filter will be my username password filter. Okay, perfect. So now we have configured our filter to get executed before the username password authentication filter. So when this get executed, that means if it is all success, then this filter is going to have the authentication object in the context. That's where this will get successfully executed. Okay, so I think that's all we had to do with the filter. Let's take a look at it again. I think yes, we have all the two main tasks, that is creating the token, validating it, and the authentication object. So yes, those two things are being done here, and then we configure it in the config file to execute it before the user password authentication filter. So I hope that is clear. That's all for this video, and I'll see you in the next. Till then, take care. Thank you.